Hi and welcome to this video. Now in this project we are trying to replace SQL code with large language models. So what I mean by that is the goal ultimately is to never have to write SQL again and instead just ask with plain human language a question about data, and then this question gets translated into SQL code, gets sent to the database, and then the result is returned to us. So that's at least the goal. So this is a project, a work in progress, so of course it's not done yet, but I just want to show you how it works. So what I'm going to use for that is, of course, a local SQL Server currently, but of course this would also work if your SQL Server would be, for instance, in an Azure cloud or somewhere else hosted. But for me, just for testing purposes, this is just my local SQL Server. So for that, I'm going to use SQL Alchemy in order to actually, get connected to the local server. And then, of course, then I can send the data there, so my SQL query to that. So then I need to have a few, information about the server itself, as you can see here with the get engine query here, because I have my server name, my database name, username and password, the driver I'm going to use, and then I actually create the engine. So that's my connection to my SQL Server database. Then I also have a function for fetching the schema. What I mean by that, or why I need this, is actually because in order to actually, for the large language model to make the right query, it needs to know some certain information about the data. So in this case, about the database. So for instance, which kind of tables are in this database, what are the column names, and so on. Because if we provide this knowledge to the large language model, so for instance to chatgpt, then of course the model is then able to infer, okay, if these are the tables, that would be the query, for instance, a join between the tables and so on, in order to fetch the right data. So that's why I'm going to use here this additional query where I select the schema information, so about the tables and so on, and then I will provide this in my prompt. That's what this is for. So that's that. And then we continue here with executing the SQL query. This is then just, we have the connection. The large language model translates our question into a proper SQL statement, and then the SQL statement gets sent to the server, and then of course the result is returned. So that is that. And then here, this is my current prompt, which is not perfect. I need to still modify it, but just to show you what it currently looks like, you're a SQL expert, your job is to convert a given request. This is actually the user request, and then into proper and fast SQL. So in SQL statements, and then provide the schema here. This is what we do with the schema information here. That's all about the structure of the database. So what kind of tables and so on, what I mentioned before. And then the user might also spell a table slightly wrong. This is also something I try to catch, right? Because it might be the case that someone is just say, I want to have data from all my users, and maybe the table is called user and not users. And then, of course, the large language model should understand, okay, this is the table he or she is referring to. So that's something also I'd like to provide or include here in this statement. So this is also something here. And then, of course, we're going to use the normal, in this case, chatgpt in this case, but you could also try out an open source model. I haven't done it so far, but that would be also interesting, maybe for another video. But for that, I'm simply using the normal chatgpt open API, OpenAI API, and I'm using this model here, the 3.5 Turbo. And then I send the messages, and this just is actually the question. So please translate our query, including this prompt we have here, then into proper SQL statement. For that, I tested the 3.5 version, but I also tested the better or newer version, which is the 4 version. And I have to admit that the more complex the SQL statement gets, the better, or the more, the bigger is the difference between the two models. So the 4 model is much better when it comes to, more complex SQL statements, just to mention that. But for the purpose of this demo here, I'm going to use the 3.5. And then I just return actually the content, which is then the translated SQL statement from OpenAI. And then I also want to have some kind of web front end, and that's why I'm going to use Streamlit here. And this is just a simple Streamlit application with just a title and then text box where the user can simply put in his or her question, and then of course the data gets also displayed as a return. And I also wanted that the SQL statement is also displayed here as well. So that is that. Then, of course, you need your OpenAI API key, which you can load with .env, so with getenv, or you can also provide it in a different way, but that would be one option. You could also, if you would like to do that, for instance, if this application is something where you want the end user to use his or her private or personal key, then of course you could also enable some kind of box in the Streamlit application where then the user would have to put in his or her key, and then of course this key would you send your own key. That could also be an option, of course. But that's it for that. And yeah, then we'll just some kind of exception handling here, and that's it. So this is what the project currently looks like. And now let me just let's run this. Let's call in this case Streamlit and then run, and then my NoSQL.py file, which is called. Also, my SQL Server is currently running in the background, so that's also fine. And then this should work. So let's actually start it. So there's our application. You can see that's a natural language to SQL query converter. And then you can ask a question here. And then let's just click the button, and then it should get translated. And what I have is I have a orders table in my database, and I also have some kind of information about sales, and for these sales I would like to know, for instance, what is the amount of sales which or the total sales amount for customers in the UK for a specific ship mode, for instance, right? This would be a query I have. So for instance, what is the total sales, let's say sales figure for UK shipped with DHL, for instance. And then I can translate it. I click on Translate SQL Query, and you can see that I get my return here. So SQL Query is select sum sales as total sales from orders table where customer is UK and ship mode is DHL. So this question is then translated via ChatGPT in this case, the OpenAI model here, into this query, and this query is then sent to the database, and then I can see here my result, which is this one. Now, of course, this result could be formatted more properly. That could be, of course, a way we can do this, but it's just here really a demo that this currently works. But of course, not everything works perfectly, so I also experienced if I write more complex SQL code here, then I get simply an error message here that it was not able to translate it. And as I said before, I tested it with the 3.5 version and also with the 4 version, and I experienced that certain, let's say, more difficult SQL queries were able to run successfully with the 4 version, but not with the 3.5 version. And yeah, that's the current status. And of course, I need to modify this further, especially the prompt. I would like to modify it here. I would like to give some additional information to the model, which hopefully then translates into more and better answered questions. But yeah, that's the current status. So hopefully you enjoyed it. And of course, feel free to also try this out yourself if you want to do that. And if you got questions, feel free to ask. If you have not done so far, please subscribe to the channel to see more. Otherwise, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.